Welcome to the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. I have a question for you. If violence showed up tomorrow, would your confidence help you or hurt you?
This podcast exists for one reason: clarity. Clarity about violence, clarity about responsibility, and clarity about what it actually means to be prepared. This is not a show about fighting. It's not about aggression, dominance, or even just tactics. It's about judgment under pressure, restraint when force is justified, and responsibility for consequences of action and inaction. My name is Greg LaBeouf, and I have spent over 3 decades working with men who face violence professionally and men who face it unexpectedly in ordinary lives. But I'm also a father and a husband, and like many of you, I've watched the world change faster than most people are willing to admit. This podcast isn't here to scare you, but it's also not here to reassure you. It's here to help you think clearly about situations that do not allow time for thinking. If you're looking for shortcuts, hype, or entertainment, this is probably not for you. But if you believe preparation is a responsibility, not an obsession, you're in the right place. Let's begin.
Okay, so I believe that most men think that preparation is about confidence, right? The more you train or the more you prepare, the more confident you become, and that is what you're looking for, right? You're looking to feel, because men want to feel ready, they want to feel capable, and they want to feel strong. Okay, and there's nothing wrong with that, but the real question is preparation about confidence? And, I think what a lot of men maybe miss is that real violence doesn't reward confidence, right? It rewards correctness. Now, I think it's important to kind of break that down. It's great to be confident, but I've gotten this over 30 years of training men, both, professional, law enforcement, military, as well as training, quote unquote, ordinary men that may face violence within their day-to-day life. I'm often asked, where does confidence come from? What is my definition of confidence? It's not so much what my definition of confidence is, it's more, what do I consider confident to be? And so I already put forward 3 kind of things, right? To feel ready, to feel capable, to feel strong would be good descriptors of what it is to be confident. But more importantly, I think, is this. I have always maintained that real world confidence is less a byproduct of talent, right? So, or of like these like above average or even extraordinary attributes. Because everyone has attributes, but of course, we have them to different varying degrees, and our attributes are, honed or refined or naturally whatever better suited to certain endeavors. You could have somebody that, at a young age starts playing soccer, and people would say, oh man, that guy's really gifted. He just has great attributes for soccer, and some for hockey, whatever it is. But we all have attributes. But I have met over the years, and I'm sure anyone listening to this has also met, or you may have experienced this yourself, but I've met many individuals who are quote unquote talented. Let's say naturally talented. So they have really good attributes, very athletic, great timing, great hand-eye coordination, whatever it happens to be. But I've met many of the people that have these talents and they lack confidence. So confidence isn't just, just having talent or these attributes doesn't automatically give you confidence. And so the bigger part that I'm pushing towards is I've always maintained that confidence is more a byproduct of experience. It's the ability to go, I have been there and done this already. I have been here and done this hundreds, if not thousands of times. So tonight's episode is about confidence versus correctness. And so at this point, I think it's really important to kind of set this up, right? Like, confidence often collapses under stress. And of course, we can all automatically think of, some very, intense situations dealing obviously with real world violence where we can understand that the consequences can be immediate and they can be severe. Just husbands, fathers, protecting your spouse, protecting your children, failure to be able to protect the people that we love, obviously it has serious and immediate consequences. And so when you are talking about violence, you are talking about, situations that happen fast, they are unfair, and they are full of consequences. So if you just look at somebody and said, okay, this person begins a training program, whatever training program it is. And so a lot of training programs, I believe, really at the core of it is confidence building. And there's a lot of ways that you build confidence in the program. I mean, just think about for parents that want to put their kids in martial arts. Often they say, what's the one thing they say? So, I just want my kid to gain some different confidence. Oh, yeah, for sure. Like learn how to defend themselves, set boundaries, all this type of stuff. It's great. And again, I'm not saying there's no correlation. I'm not saying that as you develop a certain level of skill or you learn to set boundaries, that and you start to feel more confident, that doesn't help you. But what I want people to focus in on, men to focus in on, is that you can be actually involved in a process that is teaching you, strategies, they're teaching you techniques, they're teaching you tactics, they're, teaching you maybe how to spar, they're teaching you how to fight, all these different things. And you can start to get more confidence. So you start doing better in class. You start saying, oh man, I remember I've been doing it for a year now. And, we had sparring the other night and man, I'm really starting to, I was able to get some hits in, or I was able to get a submission on somebody, or, I got really close, or I was able to destabilize a guy who was, he had outweighed me by 40 pounds. Like you can start really feeling a tremendous amount of confidence. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. But as it correlates to violence, real violence is such a different animal. My thing is I've always said is that violence is its own language. And, you can, again, you can learn to speak one language and really believe that the language that you speak is truly universal. Like, well, I know how to communicate. I communicate every single day. It's just like I speak one language. I speak English. And so, it's wouldn't be too hard for me to just, go, well, I'm a great communicator. I don't have any problem communicating. And, so I have a lot of confidence in my ability to articulate and communicate and express myself and, go up to people and ask questions and, ascertain answers to information that I need and all this great stuff. But then all of a sudden I find myself in a different part of the world, in a different culture where I do not speak the language. And when you don't speak the language, and remember, this analogy, I'm probably not facing, serious immediate consequences for my failure to be able to communicate effectively in that moment. But I can have this tremendous sense of confidence in my ability to communicate, and then all of a sudden, I'm in a high stress situation. It's happening fast, it's unfair, and it is full of consequences. And my confidence is not grounded in reality, right? So now we could jump back and say, well, that's not fair. You never, set up from the beginning that yes, of course you have to have confidence in the right thing, Greg. Like you just, you can't ask me, do you have confidence in your ability to communicate and then blindside me and put me in, a different part of the world, a different culture and people speaking different languages and all of a sudden hit me. Like, that's not fair. Like, hopefully what you can feel the stress that would come with that and that sense of unfairness. Well, yeah, that's violence, right? So the thing I want people to take away from this episode and this discussion of confidence versus correctness is that it is great to develop confidence, right? Feel ready, feel prepared, feel strong. But you have to make sure that that confidence is a byproduct of correctness. Now, let me expand this up. What do I mean by correctness? In violence, the thing that matters most is getting it right. And that has a broad spectrum of meaning. If we just start from, let's say, the beginning of this, I have training. I'm out now living my life. And now I encounter what we call a disengaged threat. I mean, this is not a physical threat yet. This might actually just be what we refer to as the pre-incident indicators, which means I'm seeing either some body language cues, I'm seeing or hearing some interpersonal communication cues, or I'm seeing some behavioral patterns that lead me to reasonably believe that there may be a threat present. It might be on a very low level right now. It might not even be directed specifically at me, but I genuinely and reasonably believe that there is the presence of a potential threat. Okay. Well, just right there with everything that I described, it is so important that we get that right. Meaning that what I listed, reading the body language cues, the interpersonal communication, and the behavioral patterns, well, those are the three metrics that we can use to reasonably and legally measure aggression and violence in other human beings as well as in ourselves. If you understand the aggression continuum and you have been taught how to read the body language indicators that tell you the varying levels of escalation, simple facial expressions. Well, when does a facial expression, or how they hold their shoulders or their arms, or how they blade their body to you, or the proximity to you, or how they are moving in and out of proximity to you, or what their eyes are doing, what their focus points are, what the tone in their voice is saying. You know what I mean? All of these different things, the behavioral patterns, all of these different pre-incident indicators to which you can be taught are grounded in facts. Right? I love this because I just put this little caveat in here. Remember that we as human beings, we don't share a singular reality. We are all have different perceptions of the world. So, but there is also facts in our world. So we all share facts. Meaning, if I said, today's a great example. If I looked outside at the weather, today's probably, I don't know, minus 15. It's been minus 35 and super cold, but today's probably only minus 15. But you could ask somebody today, hey man, like, is it cold outside today? They're going to give you their perception from their reality. You might have somebody who has grown up in the Arctic, and minus 13 to them is like a balmy day. It's like, oh man, today was beautiful. Today was warm. Where somebody else who's here visiting the city from, down in Southern California, they're up here visiting us, and they're like, man, it's freezing, right? They're dressed in 17 layers, and yet they still just can't get warm. But the facts are, the temperature was the temperature today. And this is what I'm talking about how violence favors correctness. Getting it right matters. So from everything from the pre-incident indicators, which you can be taught, which are then legally defendable. Because you see, the human system, it's like if you thought of them as like poker players. If somebody's sitting at a poker table and they have a tell, they're having a physiological response to favorable cards or unfavorable cards. Can they mask their excitement? Can they mask their disappointment? Can they mask the fact that they're bluffing? And of course, as the stakes increase, can they continue to mask it, and can they mask it as well? Well, you can see that in violence, if their intent is nefarious, if their intent is to do us, grievous bodily harm, up to and including potentially death, can they hide that intent? Are there physiological indicators? Psychological indicators? Are there indicators that are telling us, forewarning us of what their intent might be? And the answer to that, of course, is yes. Now, to varying degrees. But your ability to read that is not connected to confidence alone. If you are, and now again, if you were trained in these indicators, and your confidence comes from experience of saying, I have been trained specifically for this type of situation, which then carries forward to meaning I have been there and done this. My training has demanded of me that I see these indicators prior to taking action. So just for an example, in the training that I do, when we show somebody, let's just keep this really simple. When I show someone, let's say, a physical tool, because we can all agree that there is and will be potentially moments in time where it is required of you to physically defend yourself. Okay, so we call this the point of no return. It's become physical. You must physically defend yourself or your family. Okay. Now, if and when that situation happens, right? When I teach somebody how to physically use the tool, the strategy, and the tactics to protect themselves, once I've shown them that in my training, it is always preceded by the indicators, or by what I should say is by the necessity for my client to interpret indicators before they execute the physical tool, the strategy, the tactic, or the tool. Where most training programs, you are simply repping out the physical tool, the strategy, or the tactic. I mean, if you look at, which I was involved in for a number of years, and I still have great friends that are involved in this industry, but if you go into the combative arts, so kickboxing, Thai boxing, mixed martial arts, anything like that, they, of course, will teach the tools. You'll learn your jabs, your crosses, you'll learn your takedowns, you'll learn these things. And then what you do is in training, you spend a tremendous amount of your time executing these tools, snapping out your jab, working your combinations, working your takedowns, working your slams, all like working your positions on the ground, working your submissions. You spend all the time doing this, right? Why? Because the context with which you're going to be executing these skill sets is going to be, it is already predetermined. Like you're showing up at a tournament, you're showing up at a competition, you're in sparring that night. So, you tap gloves, the ref introduces you, shake hands, he establishes the rules, and then you get out there and you execute, your chosen techniques, strategies. In violence, however, there's no predetermined meeting of this. There's no, there's nothing like that. You are reading in real time, often, rapidly evolving, imperfect information that is happening unfast in unfair situations. Often, the pressure is to be able to think quick when shit is happening quicker than you can think. And the expectation is that you get this right. So, what I'm just wanted to boil down in this episode was that a lot of the male ego comes with having confidence, whether it's warranted or not warranted. And I'm no different than anybody else, right? One of my favorite commercials that I've seen out there, and this was, a fairly old commercial, but, still, anyways, was they showed the difference between women getting out of a shower after using some sort of body, so whatever it is, but they get out of the shower and they look in the mirror and they see imperfections and they see all the things they don't like about their body. And then, of course, they flash to a man getting out of the shower and he looks in the mirror and, sucks his gut in and puffs his chest up and turns to the side a little bit. And he just loves what he sees. You know what I mean? And of course, he by no means has this perfect body. There are all these flaws, yet the male ego, the male perception is like, yep, still got it. And I love that. That's a tremendous amount of confidence. And that commercial's funny because it's true, because it's real. But if you took that confidence or that bravado that men have, which serves us well in a lot of areas, and you would say, and you apply that to violence, are you ready? Are you capable? Are you strong? Can you protect what you love most? Most men, the answer is yes. Matter of fact, they just did a study in the last year that the results are quite alarming if you really sit with it for a few seconds, that most men overestimate their ability and capability to fight by 4,000%. That's a staggering number, 4,000%. So it's like, where does this come from? Well, a lot of that comes from that bravado. A lot of it comes from just the male ego and the male perception and the psychological program, or it's not even psychological, it's in our DNA to be protectors and providers. And so it's wired into us to be like, yes, I can protect. And oftentimes we might confuse the willingness to protect with the capability to protect, with the understanding and knowledge that comes with that we need to be able to protect, which brings us back to, again, this, we need to be correct, not confident. We have to know that we can make the right decisions under pressure. Okay, so not only do we have to be able to get the pre-incident indicators right, we have to make sure that we understand the exact moment in time that this person now presents a reasonable level of imminent grievous, or there is a reasonable intent or reasonable belief that we are facing imminent grievous bodily harm or death, then we have to reasonably apply the correct amount of force, now, which may include lethal force, but of course, which again, dire consequences. We have to make sure that we are reading it right. And then we also have to make sure that we apply the right level of force for the right duration of time, for as long as that threat is imminent grievous bodily harm or death, as long as that threat is there. And then the moment that that threat is no longer at the level of imminent grievous bodily harm or death, we are then moderating our level of force, if not completely, disengaging, removing ourselves from the situation at the earliest possible moment. I mean, it is all of these things that we must get correct, and that is a tremendous amount of pressure, right? So that, what I'm trying to set up for people is giving you a better understanding of feeling prepared and genuinely being prepared. So again, if you asked, man, do you feel prepared when it comes to the idea of defending yourself, your family? And I think a lot of men would say yes. And why? Because there's a certain amount of that wired into our DNA. There's a certain amount of that that's tied to the ego and the bravado. There's a certain, and there may even be a certain amount of it that is tied to training that you may or may not, that you may have experienced, that you may be currently doing. But we then have to really look at our training and say, listen, if you follow me for any time, any length of time, I'm always trying to separate and get people to understand that violence is its own language, that violence isn't a fight. But this doesn't for a second, I don't for a second want anyone to ever think that I don't believe and understand that trained fighters, trained martial artists, really good martial artists, really good, well-trained fighters can't use their skill sets to defend and protect themselves. They absolutely can. But also understand that I have seen and known, I've seen a lot more, but I've known a handful of really good fighters who have faced some very serious consequences for using their fight skills to engage in a fight. Now, I didn't say protect themselves, because they often face criminal charges after. And those charges didn't just come about, they didn't come about because they were out there picking on people. They found themselves in a situation where they were the target of an attack, so they were the intended victim of a criminal violent assault. And then these individuals defended themselves. I'm putting this in air quotes for those that are listening, not watching. And the problem is that after the fact, there are consequences for defending themselves because they got a bunch of it wrong. You can't just use your boxing, your kickboxing, your MMA. You can't just break joints. You can't just slam people to the ground. You can't just use your knife. You can't just use tack lights. You can't just use techniques, tools, equipment, strategies, and tactics that you might use in the ring in a fight or that you might train in your dojo. You can't just take those and use those the second somebody is aggressive to you or potentially even attacks you. You can't just use those with no restraints. You can't just assume that, the second somebody attacks me, I'm free to fight and do whatever I want to do to whatever level I want to do it, or to whatever level I'm capable of doing it. You're not going to get it right. And that is where, that's what I wanted to do an episode on this. Because I see this way. I think for most men, the thing that I think kills a man the most is regret. If something happens that we could have, or maybe even you could throw the word should have, been aware about, like violence. It's unimaginable to me to believe that there's a man in this world who has a partner, who has children, people that he loves and cares for, parents, anyone, and you're not concerned about the state of the world. You're not concerned about the people that you drive to. You literally drive down the roads next to these people. You're standing at sporting events next to these people. There are people that are operating under the influence of stress, anxiety, pressure, financial, religious, political, whatever you want, that are literally like pressure cookers with no release valve. They are boiling. And you just have no idea when the final straw that breaks the camel's back and that pressure explodes and yourself or someone you love is on that X, is right at ground zero for that. It's just unfathomable to me that you're not worried or not thinking about violence and about the ability to protect. Now, so regret. If something ever does happen and you are living in denial, it'll become impossible for you to not admit to yourself that you should have known better, you did know better, and yet you did nothing. You were unprepared. It will be amplified if you come to recognize that, yeah, I knew, I was aware, and I genuinely believed I was prepared. I was confident that I was prepared. And then you realize that violence doesn't reward confidence, and that confidence often implodes. It completely collapses under real world pressure. That is going to amplify that regret. The other side is that regret, I think, destroys men. And then I think the other side is there is a tremendous fear of getting into trouble, of not getting it right. You might have the physical size, you might have the physical strength, you might have youth on your side, you might have attributes, all these different things. But what may even scare you more with, if you are an individual that possesses those things, is that you're right, I just don't know what I can do, when I can do it, what to say, what not to say, should and if and when it happens. I'm terrified that I'm going to end up in jail. I'm terrified that I'm going to end up losing my job. I'm going to lose the ability to travel, support my family, and then all of the other severe consequences that come with that. And so there's just this paralysis because of this fear of not getting it right, which is why, again, in this episode, and I said it at the beginning of the show, if violence showed up tomorrow, would your confidence help you or hurt you? And as you maybe just sit with that question or think about it or attempt to answer it over the next week and think about, what we've talked about in this episode, I think for a lot of people, they may come to recognize that their confidence, although confidence is a great thing, may actually hurt you. Because what is that confidence rooted in? What is it grounded in? And then if you do have, and you say, no, I feel very fortunate to have confidence. And I genuinely believe that confidence is a byproduct of it's rooted in correctness. Because, and maybe this should just be kind of one of my final thoughts on this, is that control follows awareness, right? So we have to become aware of something first. And you, in my opinion, you are at a very high risk of not getting it right unless you have been trained. The right type of training, where somebody has taught you the right skill sets, the right knowledge, and given you the right experiences, and has trained and restrained that into you. And that's what the process is about. Because again, you just have to understand, I got to get it right. And what does that mean? What do I need? What's the skill with this? And then from that, you're going to gain some of this confidence, like real world confidence. And I think, again, I've been doing this for 30 years and I've trained, a lot of individuals. And there's always there's always a part of you that just understands the pressure of getting it right, which is what motivates the training. I mean, what keeps me training all the time isn't trying to up my performance. It's always trying to offset the weight of the responsibility. There's a tremendous responsibility to becoming a protector for your family, becoming a protector for yourself, becoming a protector for just the world we live in, because you have to get it right. And so that's what, every day I wake up, that's what gets me out there every day doing my training. That's what gets me and keeps me, studying the pre-incident indicators and learning how to regulate my physiology and psychology and the emotion and this. And now the interesting thing with this is, again, a lot of people go, oh my God, there's so much. And I have this busy life and who has time for this and stuff. The skill sets of learning to prepare for violence are relatable to the skill sets of learning to drive. You didn't just, for most people, like, maybe back in the day, you start on the farm and driving, one of the trucks around the farm and, learn basic things, and then you take your learner's test and your driver's test, and, but you get experience, you get in and do it every single day. You don't have to do a lot of it, but over time, you've built this confidence and this understanding, this certainty for how driving works and how to do it safely and the rules of the road and how to interpret and intuit what other drivers are doing and all that type of stuff. And again, maybe that's a perfect analogy, because there's lots of people out there, if I ask men, are you a good driver? They'd say yes. And a lot of people that know them and have ridden with them would say not on your life, right? So confidence, again, correctness is better. When you're driving, you got to get it right. Because you can have all the confidence in the world that you're a good driver and end up, been in 10 accidents. And it's like, okay, well, something's wrong here. And violence is no different. So it's not as big a struggle as men think, but it is a struggle that you need to be guided. Someone has to kind of show you what it is you need to know, give you those experiences so that you can, in fact, get it right. So anyways, listen, that was kind of today's question. That was today's topic. I wanted to break it down with you. I appreciate everybody and your time, and I enjoy it. And I'm going to cut to my outro here. But every week we'll be back, new episodes, new questions, give you guys food for thought.
If you've listened this far, take a moment before moving on, not to agree with anything that I've said, but to notice what stayed with you. These conversations aren't meant to provide answers that you can memorize. They're meant to sharpen your judgment, to clarify your responsibility, and to help you think clearly about moments that don't allow time for thinking. If this episode raised questions, that's the point. If it made you more cautious rather than confident, that's a good thing. And if it didn't resonate with you, you don't need to force it. Preparation is personal, and it has to align with who you are and what you're responsible for. You don't need to do anything after this. Just carry the questions with you and pay attention to how you see the world this week. We'll continue the conversation next time.